Peter Singer, Practical Ethics. Your everyday choices have profound moral implications. Whether you've thought about it or not, the clothes you wear, the food you eat, and even your bank account could be a matter of life and death for others. These kinds of concerns aren't about religion, rules, or laws either. They're about ethics, the critical examination of right and wrong. This is the powerful argument of influential philosopher and ethicist Peter Singer's groundbreaking work, which challenges you to rethink your moral compass for a more equitable world. In this work, Singer dives into hot-button issues like animal rights, the beginning and end of life, and our moral obligation to strangers in faraway lands. And though his ideas are often controversial, even sometimes shocking, they're always thought-provoking. His approach to everyday ethics can lead you to question assumptions you never even knew you had. This Blink explores the minefield of modern life through Singer's ethical lens, on a journey that might just transform your perspective on what it means to live ethically. So, is it ethical? Ethics and morality are often seen as distinct concepts, but philosopher Peter Singer argues in his groundbreaking approach that they're essentially the same thing. He uses these terms interchangeably, viewing both as the realm of reasoning about right and wrong. But Singer also emphasizes that ethics isn't about reinforcing any particular moral code, like those of a particular religion or society. Instead, it's a practical tool for critically examining your beliefs and actions every day. There is considerable evidence of ethical behavior in great apes, meaning that the roots of morality run deep in our evolutionary history, predating modern human religions and cultures. Consider a common scenario. You're walking down the street and spot a wallet on the ground with no one around. Ethics, in Singer's view, isn't about blindly following a preset rule like do not steal. It's about thoughtfully considering the consequences of your actions for everyone involved. This approach introduces the concept of utilitarianism, the idea that we should act to create the most happiness and reduce the most suffering for all. He refines this further with the idea of preference utilitarianism, meaning that everyone should consider what individuals would prefer if they were fully informed. For example, imagine someone enjoys smoking cigarettes. A simple utilitarian approach might say this is good because it brings them pleasure. But preference utilitarianism asks us to go further. If this person fully understood the long-term health consequences, financial costs and effects of smoking on those around them, would choosing that pleasure really be a good thing? Preference utilitarianism respects individual autonomy while also acknowledging that our immediate desires don't always align with our deeper, more informed preferences. It's about maximizing the satisfaction of these well-informed preferences for all affected individuals, not just pursuing short-term pleasures or following societal norms. Now imagine you're in a grocery store facing two chocolate bars. One is cheaper, but made using child labour. The other costs more, but is ethically produced. Singer's approach asks you to weigh the consequences beyond just your immediate benefits of delicious chocolate and cost savings, and consider the greater benefit to all of ending child labour. This way of thinking often challenges our instincts and societal norms. It pushes individuals to expand their moral circle, considering the interests of beings they might typically ignore, including people in distant countries and also animals. And ethics, according to Singer, isn't about finding perfect answers. It's about critically examining choices and their impacts. In the next chapter, you'll see how this approach can radically change how you view everyday decisions. From what you eat to how you spend your money, ethical considerations touch every part of your life, whether you realize it or not. The equal consideration of interests. At the heart of Singer's ethical framework lies a powerful principle: the equal consideration of interests. This idea challenges us to expand our moral circle beyond its traditional boundaries. He argues that when making ethical decisions, we should give equal weight to the comparable interests of all affected beings, regardless of their species, race, gender, or any other characteristic. This doesn't mean treating everyone identically, but rather considering similar interests with equal seriousness. To understand the concept, imagine two beings in pain, a human and a dog. Singer contends that if the pain is of equal intensity and duration, we should consider alleviating it equally important in both cases. This flies in the face of conventional wisdom that often prioritizes human suffering over animal suffering. This principle has even more far-reaching implications because it forces us to reconsider how we treat animals in all contexts, from factory farming to medical research. Do the benefits we derive from these practices truly outweigh the immense suffering they cause? Singer also argues that the geographical location or temporal existence of a being shouldn't diminish the moral weight we give to their interests. In other words, equal consideration also applies to how we think about future generations and people in distant lands. So, in a situation where you're considering either buying a luxury item for yourself or donating that money to save a child's life in a developing country, the principle of equal consideration would say that the child's interest in staying alive far outweighs your interest in the luxury item. Clearly, this approach often leads to conclusions that many find uncomfortable or counterintuitive, because it suggests that in many cases we're behaving unethically simply by living our normal lives in affluent societies while others suffer in extreme poverty. But Singer isn't calling for guilt or self-sacrifice. Instead, he's inviting us to critically examine our choices and their global impacts, not for moral perfection, but more mindful choices. By expanding our circle of moral consideration, we can make more ethical decisions that positively affect a wider range of beings. The equal consideration of interests challenges everyone to think beyond their immediate surroundings and personal preferences. It asks individuals to cultivate a more impartial, global perspective on ethics, one that could radically reshape our understanding of right and wrong. Ethics and animals. When you sit down for a meal, you might not think about the ethical implications of what's on your plate. But Singer argues that your food choices have profound moral consequences. As we learned in the last chapter, Singer's approach to animal ethics stems from his principle of equal consideration of interests. He contends that the capacity to suffer is the key factor in determining moral status. Since animals, particularly mammals and birds, can experience pain and distress, Singer argues that their interests should be given serious moral consideration. Consider a typical factory farm. Chickens are often cramped in tiny cages, unable to spread their wings. Pigs, highly intelligent animals, are confined in spaces so small they can barely turn around. Cows are separated from their calves shortly after birth. Singer argues that the suffering caused by these practices far outweighs the pleasure humans derive from eating meat. You might quickly think, but humans are more intelligent than animals. But Singer challenges this reasoning by asking you to consider a human with severe cognitive impairments. Would you consider it ethical to treat them the way we treat farm animals? If not, then intelligence alone can't justify our treatment of animals. Singer doesn't argue that it's always wrong to use animals for human purposes. Instead, he advocates for a careful weighing of interests. For instance, he acknowledges that in some cultures or situations, eating meat might be necessary for survival. But for most people in developed countries, he argues, meat is a luxury that comes at too high a moral cost. Singer extends this reasoning to other uses of animals too, like clothing and entertainment. He challenges you to consider whether the fleeting pleasure of wearing a fur coat or watching animals perform in a circus justifies the suffering involved in producing these experiences. These arguments have some pretty far-reaching implications. If you accept them, you might need to radically change your diet and lifestyle. But again, Singer's not calling for perfection. Even just reducing your consumption of animal products can significantly decrease animal suffering. By asking you to consider the ethics of eating animals, Singer isn't just talking about food, he's inviting you to expand your circle of moral consideration and to think critically about practices you might have taken for granted. Ethics at the start and the end of life. When discussing the beginning and end of life, you enter ethically complex and politically charged territory. Still, Singer addresses these sensitive issues with thought-provoking arguments that challenge conventional views. On reproductive rights, Singer's approach centres on the concept of personhood. He argues that what matters morally is not merely being human, but having certain characteristics like self-awareness and the ability to plan for the future. Imagine a scenario where continuing a pregnancy would cause significant suffering to the potential child or mother. Singer suggests that in such cases, terminating the pregnancy might be the more ethical choice, as it prevents greater suffering. But he also emphasises the importance of supporting mothers and children in such a way that these difficult scenarios don't arise in the first place. For this, he points to social safety nets, including access to education and reproductive health care, as well as job security. When it comes to euthanasia, Singer applies similar reasoning. He asks you to consider a situation where someone is experiencing unbearable, untreatable pain and wishes to end their life. Singer argues that respecting their autonomy and reducing suffering might justify assisted dying in such cases. But these aren't simple issues. Singer acknowledges the risks of potential abuse and the need for strict safeguards. He encourages you to think critically about how society can protect vulnerable individuals while still respecting personal autonomy in life and death decisions. These arguments often provoke strong reactions. You might find yourself agreeing with some points while strongly disagreeing with others. That's okay. The goal isn't to provide easy answers, but to prompt deeper reflection on these complex issues. Consider how these ideas might apply in your own life or the lives of loved ones. What if you had to make decisions about end-of-life care for a family member? How might your views on reproductive rights change if faced with a difficult pregnancy? By exploring these challenging topics, Singer isn't advocating for any specific policy. Instead, he's inviting you to examine your own beliefs and consider different perspectives. He argues that by thinking critically about these issues, we can work towards more compassionate and ethically grounded approaches to some of life's most difficult decisions. Expanding the moral circle. Ethics and global poverty. When you think about ethics, you might focus on how to treat those closest to you. But Peter Singer and his preference utilitarianism challenge you to expand your moral circle to encompass the entire world, and especially those living in extreme poverty. He argues that if you have the power to prevent something bad without sacrificing anything of comparable moral significance, you're ethically obligated to do so. This principle in particular, when applied globally, has far-reaching implications. First, imagine you're walking past a shallow pond and see a child drowning. You could easily wade in and save them, but doing so would ruin your expensive shoes. Most people would say you're morally required to save the child. But Singer contends that the exact same logic applies to helping those in extreme poverty. Now imagine you've just bought a brand new smartphone. Meanwhile, in a developing country, a child is dying from a preventable disease. The cost of your phone could have provided life-saving medication for many such children. Singer argues that the moral distinction between this scenario and that of the drowning child is less obvious than you might think. He's not arguing that you need to give away everything you own. Instead, he proposes the more moderate approach of donating a significant portion of your income to effective charities. He suggests that people in wealthy nations could easily give 10% of their income without any real hardship, potentially saving or dramatically improving many lives. You might wonder, but isn't this the government's job? Singer argues that while governments should do more, this doesn't absolve individuals of responsibility. He points out that many effective charities can do more good per dollar than typical government aid programs. Singer's arguments challenge common assumptions about charity. Instead of giving based on emotional appeal, he advocates for using evidence to find the most effective ways to help. This approach, known as effective altruism, aims to maximize the positive impact of charitable giving. Singer's ideas on global poverty extend beyond just donating money. He encourages you to consider how your career choices, consumption habits, and political engagement affect people around the world. Could you choose a career that allows you to earn more and give more? Might buying fair trade products help reduce global inequality? These arguments can feel overwhelming. You might worry that living ethically by these standards would be too demanding. Singer acknowledges this concern but suggests that giving more often leads to greater personal satisfaction and meaning in life. By presenting these ideas, Singer isn't trying to make you feel guilty. Instead, he's inviting you to see the tremendous positive impact you can have on the world. He argues that by slightly adjusting priorities and habits, people in wealthy nations could collectively end extreme poverty. Singer's perspective doesn't just change how we think about charity. It challenges us to reconsider what it means to live an ethical life in an interconnected world. The main takeaway of this blink to Practical Ethics by Peter Singer is that ethics isn't about following rigid rules, but critically examining your choices and their consequences. By considering the interests of all affected beings equally, you're challenged to expand your moral circle beyond traditional boundaries. This approach has profound implications for how humans treat animals, make decisions about life and death, and address global poverty. It suggests that your everyday choices, from what you eat to how you spend your money, carry significant ethical weight. While these ideas can be uncomfortable, they invite everyone to reconsider what it means to live ethically in an interconnected world, potentially transforming our perspective and actions for the better. Okay, that's it for this blink. We hope you enjoyed it. If you can, please take the time to leave us a rating. We always appreciate your feedback. See you in the next blink.